Good morning and welcome to Shoreside Operational, not just another supply chain podcast. I am your host, Kathleen DePrizio. Today we are going to talk about bottlenecks. So the bottleneck that is happening right now in the Panama Canal is creating basically a wave or a ripple effect throughout the industry. Shippers are curious why we can't go through the Panama Canal, and that's because of the lack of water. But that bottleneck has created a problem with ports and terminals as well. When you have ships that are delayed and they're not coming in on pro forma, they're not coming in when they're supposed to, it creates that ripple effect that we're seeing at the ports and terminals right now, where they are taking vessels first come, first serve, instead of actually doing pro forma windows, like berth windows. This can actually cascade further to create even a further problem with congestion on the terminals and everything like that. So when we're looking at the Panama Canal or the Red Sea problems, or even back in the day with the pandemic, those are problems that compound and will actually have a ripple effect throughout the entire industry. It's not just the ships, it's not just the Panama Canal, it's not just the ports and terminals, because it will cascade. It's like whenever a ship comes in off pro forma. It comes in off pro forma, or the terminal can't get the ship in on pro forma in a port. That has a cascade effect on all the downline ports. So say the ship is coming into LA Long Beach and it has to wait, like it did during the pandemic, and it has to wait 30 days to get in. That 30 days creates a problem, and then it's going to create a problem whenever that ship sails to Oakland, because now Oakland doesn't have the berth available because now it's off pro forma. And then whenever it sails back out to Asia, it's going to have even more of a problem because Asian ports are very congested. I had a colleague ask me the other day what's going on with the ports in Busan. That there's one port that is looking really good while the other one is not. It all depends upon what services call that port in comparison to the other port. So say for example, take LA, Long Beach area for an example. What is it? Oh my goodness. I forgot the name of the terminal. Okay, so TTI, take TTI, and you take like WBCT. There is a different dynamic between the ships that go into TTI in comparison to WBCT. The dynamic is different. The ships are sized different. It takes longer to work a ship that would say called TTI in comparison to WBCT, because the volume is different. Or say APM terminals in comparison to Long Beach Container Terminal. Long Beach Container Terminal is a fully automated terminal. They do have good cranes and everything like that. It's a fully automated, so it goes a little bit faster because I hate to say it like this, but there's no human factor involved. And a lot of the operations, they groom the yard overnight and everything like that. But APM has a traditional side or a conventional side, and then the automated side. So it depends upon whether the vessel goes into which side. So there's a difference, not to mention the services that go in there. So if you've got these big beast ships, like these Maersk ships and the big HMM ships and the big CMA ships going into these terminals, and you also have to look at the labor structure. Labor structure can actually be a very big problem. Okay, so back in the day, whenever I used to manage refrigerated equipment, I always had a problem with the fact that our lift in a certain terminal that was the company I used to work with, our lift was only 12 moves per hour. Are you kidding me? 12 moves per hour? I can go next door to YTI and get 22, 23 moves per hour, which, by the way, is still pathetic. If anything, you should be at least 28 or higher on moves per hour whenever you are lifting containers to a ship. Anyways, I digress. But what I'm saying is that it depends upon the ships that are going in there. It depends upon the labor that's working these cranes. It depends upon a lot of different factors. It also depends upon how fast the truckers are coming in and clearing out the yard. It depends upon the gate. How fast does the gate go? Is there a delayed gate process? Does it take only 12 minutes for a trucker to get completely in the gate and get to his position in the yard to actually pick up? Or does it take, a half an hour? There are differences, and there are different processes. So not every terminal is the same. There are different structures. Not every terminal is the same. Not every process is the same. Not every setup or layout is the same. Okay, so for example, you take APM terminal in New York, New Jersey, in comparison to, say, MAR terminal in New York, New Jersey. Whereas APM is looking to try and increase their gate throughput. It's good because it gets the trucker in off the street faster and gets them in the gate faster. However, their yard is freaking chaos. It is pure chaos. And that could be a potential problem. Where the trucker has to go and sit in a line and wait for a flip or wait for a machine to become available in order to even service him. Whereas the gate procedure at MAR terminal may take just a tad bit longer, but then there's a concierge service where the trucker goes in and he pulls into his spot, and that signals the yard to bring him his container. There are no tractor trailers running through the yard. It is just the container handling equipment. It is a safer environment. It is more calm. It is more collected. And believe it or not, the actual turn time, processing, everything like that is actually faster at MAR terminal. And that's just because it's the way it's structured. But this could be completely misconstrued when shippers are looking to try and get their containers out of the yard because of they go into, say, APM because that's where the ship calls, because that's where the ship has an actual contract. It's with that terminal. But you can't compare another terminal to another terminal depending upon the service. You have to look at the services. You have to look and see how many services are calling that terminal? How many ships call that terminal per day? How many berths does that port have? What are the size of the cranes? What type of handling equipment do they have? What is the structure of the actual yard? Do they have on-dock rail? Do they have trucking at their availability? There are a lot of different factors. And you also have to take into consideration, trucking. Excuse me for 1 second. Trucking. Is there enough trucking in the area to support the containers that are coming off the ship? If you're dumping 6,000 containers into a yard coming off of a ship, do you have enough room? Is the rail backed up? Like during the pandemic, a lot of these ports and terminals got backed up on the West Coast because of the rail, because truckers even inland weren't picking up the containers, and it was creating a problem for the yards to clear out the yards because the rail couldn't push back the empty freaking spines. They couldn't push back the cars that were needed to actually build these trains. Then you have to take into consideration the fact of matchback. Yes, there is that thing called matchback. So if a container carrier, CMA or APL or HAPAG does not have a 100% matchback with what they're pushing from, say, like LA Long Beach inland, and they're not pushing as much from Chicago or Memphis or Kansas City back to the West Coast, who's going to do that? Those rail cars can't come in because they're stuck. They're stuck because the rail is all about money. I hate to say it and hate to break it to the rail, but it's all about money. And we all know that because of your rates. But anyways, they're not going to push an empty train It just doesn't work that way. They have to actually have containers on that train to go back. Um, a lot of shippers were trying to do their own thing during the pandemic. You actually created part of the problem. You actually contributed to part of the problem because these terminals and these ports were already congested enough, and here you are shoving another ship up their ass. It doesn't work that way. You have to take into consideration the actual infrastructure of the terminals and ports that your carrier calls to. Like, okay, so take example, Savannah. Savannah, everybody calls Savannah. Just about everybody calls Savannah. Let me rephrase that. Just about every carrier calls Savannah. And that is simply because the shippers demand it. And that's because the market in the Savannah market is so popular and they have such a large distribution center, hub right there, that a lot of shippers need to actually go there because they need to service the actual customers on that side of the Mississippi. And it's a hell of a lot cheaper to actually have the ship just call there and have a distribution center there than it does to push a container from the West Coast inland and to get it there. So whenever you have that happening, you have the terminal that is, the footprint of Savannah Terminal is humongous, absolutely humongous, but there's still congestion issues. And that is because of the construction that they're doing. That is because the constant dredging that they're doing. That is because there is fog in that area that shuts down the river. That is because the pilots refuse to allow ships to pass depending upon the size. Depending upon the size of the ship, it is not allowed to traverse in the dark hours. There are a lot of different factors that play into that terminal and that port. With that being said, you will have the port itself has actually said, nope, we're blowing out all of the berth windows and we're going to a first come, first serve basis. So basically, if you get there and you're this size ship, you actually, if nobody else is in front of you, you can come in right away. However, if you're this size ship and you've got 5 people in front of you, you have to wait for those 5 people because you got there 6th in line. And it's just the way it is. And it all depends upon the size of the berth. So they've got 9 berths right now. But if you take into consideration, okay, so they have 9 berths. But not all the ships fit in these berths at the same time. These ships are huge. You've got a 15,000 TEU ship. It's going to take up 2 berths, whether you like it or not. Plain and simple. So now you're down to 7 berths, not 9. And then you've got another 14,000. You've got a 14,000 ship coming in right next to it. So now you're down to 5 berths. Now you can take 5 smaller ships and you can actually back them up, line them up and actually work them. But you only got 2 of the bigger ships and working, and that's taking up 4 different berths. So now you've got 3 more big ships waiting out in the water, waiting to come in. It is the way it is. This is the way it's structured. A lot of people don't understand that there are a lot of bottlenecks. There are a lot of problems that can actually come from this. The fog, the berth window, depending upon tides. There's a lot of dynamics that go into berthing a ship and bringing a ship in. Take Philly, for example. Philly is not a very big port. And you can't get a bigger ship in there. They're smaller ships because you have to come up the river. Oh, and by the way, it's 7 freaking hours just to get up the river. I used to have a service when I was a port captain that used to call Philly. I had to explain to Singapore all the time how my ship came in. It took 7 hours in and 7 hours out. But the ship was only at the berth for 4 hours because I didn't have a lot of moves. So it only took 4 hours to work her. So it was a half a shift. Yeah. 14 hours in and out for 4 hours worth of work. Talk about a money dump. Oh my God, because the amount of money it costs to actually berth a ship and work a ship and get a ship there with the bunker and everything like that, it's exponential. But they didn't understand that it's an inland port. It's not open water. It's not like it's a Prince Rupert where they're just coming off the open freaking sea. A lot of these ports and terminals have inland waterways. There are riverways that actually need to be traversed in order for the ship to actually get to the berth. They're not just sitting there on open water. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. Now, granted, sometimes these ports are closer to that open water, where it only takes, say, like if you're sailing a ship from Savannah to Charleston, and you're actually going berth to berth, it's only 13 hours. Literally, that is from the time that you leave Savannah's berth, like literally you are pulled out and you go up the river and you sail to Charleston, and then you get the berth, and then you get to the berth. That is literally 13 hours from berth to berth, if the berth is available. They can't look at this. They also have to look at jet streams. Jet streams can create a delay in ships. If the ship is going all the way up to New York, depending upon the direction of the water, it may actually be going against the freaking tide. It may be going against the actual flow of the water. So it's actually going to slow down a ship. And I'm sorry, as a carrier, we're not going to speed up a ship and burn more fuel to get there. We're going to work that into our schedule, and we're going to work in those tides and those jet streams and everything like that to make sure that we actually build in the correct amount of time to get to a berth. But there are, like I said, there are tide windows, and with the fact that these ships are getting bigger, and so take a port like Jacksonville, for example. Jacksonville has humongous amounts of dynamics. They have a dynamic tide where they can be negative tide. I hate it when people use the phrase double negative. There's not such a thing as double negative. Seriously. I mean, how long have you been in shipping? Anyways, but there is a dynamic tide. So there is a very small window when that ship can actually get into Jacksonville Port and when it can get out of Jacksonville Port. You take into consideration the fact of infrastructure in the area. Okay, so Traypac Terminal, if you're looking at Jacksonville, Traypac Terminal is under the bridge and under the power lines. So everybody's like, oh, the politicians and the Port Authority, they're driving me insane. Oh, we're going to raise the power lines. We've got the funding for it. Well, it's not going to do a damn bit of good unless you raise the bridge, which you're not going to do. We already know that that's not in the works. It's not actually in the budget. So I don't care who they're promising that they're going to raise the power lines. No, all you're still going to do is be able to get to Blount Island, and that is it. You're not going to get to Traypac. So make sure that if you're taking a ship to Traypac and you make a contract with Traypac, that you're not upsizing your own ships and killing your own contract, or make sure you have an out clause, so that way you can get out of it without paying any fines. But there's the whole point here is that there's different structures and different infrastructure. There's different dynamics whenever it comes to different ports and terminals. Not one port, not one in the entire world is the same as another. Vancouver, for example, Delta Port, it's actually not a bad terminal. They got a little bit of room. Centerm is always congested. Centerm is always backed up. Centerm is always having a problem. Centerm has a problem more, believe it or not, Centerm actually has more of a problem with the rail systems, the CP and the CN, than Deltaport does. I don't know why. There's no real reason for it. It's just the way that the actual terminal is structured. But there is that problem and there is that dynamic. So whenever you're looking to shift volume from one port to another, look at what's already there. Look at the infrastructure of the port. Make sure that you're making a logical decision, that you're not actually screwing yourself just because somebody's promised you something lined in gold. Because I can guarantee you, it's bullshit. But anyways, I digress. So I will be talking on this podcast on, like I said, on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I will be doing this podcast. I'm also doing my other podcast, my SSO coaching podcast, SSO Coaching 76. on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So if you want to follow that, they are both on Spotify. They are both on YouTube. And for the coaching podcast, you can actually see the blog. I actually write a blog, and I post that on LinkedIn. I am getting the blog page going on my websites. On my website, as soon as I get the website up and running. I'm still working on that. Sorry, I was just not where I want it to be, so that's why I haven't launched it yet. But it will be there. Shoreside Operational is still up and running. If you guys need to contact me, you can reach out at Shoreside Operational. You can DM me through YouTube. You can DM me through LinkedIn. You can DM me through Spotify. I don't know. Just reach out and we'll get this going here. And you guys have a great day.